Babe, there's a man in the house. This happened about 2 years ago when I was 19 and had just moved out of student accommodation into an actual flat with a friend group of 6. The night we moved in, it was just me and one of my girls I'm close friends with. Let's call her Lucy. I had a boyfriend over at the time. Let's call him Alec. The other people who were moving in 2 weeks later, as they were all on various holidays or visiting home. So it was just the 3 of us. Lucy was in her room, and Alec and I were smoking a joint in bed watching kung fu movies. Him and I start to notice a man, around 300 pounds and 6 foot, pacing outside our window and looking in occasionally. We are on the basement floor at this time, but the windows are on ground level. Okay, that's fucking weird. But we'll just make sure the windows are locked. 20 or so minutes pass by, and everything seems okay, until Lucy runs into my room and says, "Babe, there's a man in the house." We left the door unlocked by accident. Fucking chills. I'm like, "What the fuck do you mean there's a man in the house?" Alec is frozen solid. Me and Lucy go into the hall, and the huge man who we saw looking in the windows is in our hall. We ask, "What are you doing here?" And he pulls out his phone and shows us a text message from an unsaved number with our address written on it, and something about people being inside. What the fuck? He tells us he's looking for his girlfriend, and that she lives here. And we're like, "No the hell she does not. Please remove yourself from our house." He says okay, and that he'll phone his girlfriend. He turns his phone low volume, and he's speaking to another man on the phone, who is clearly not his girlfriend. With more urgency this time, we tell him to get out of the house and he says okay. He leaves, we lock the door, and everyone is shaking. He is still on the phone with this man outside, and they're speaking a language we don't understand, but we can hear him getting angry. I tell Alec to please make the scary man go away, and he goes outside and tells him to shift away from our doorway as he's really scaring us. He says okay, and his taxi is here. Then, he walks up to a dead-end street where no taxis can go. Again, what the fuck? We tell our upstairs neighbors, who we had met earlier that day, about the whole ordeal. We'll call them Charlotte, Matt, and Rob. They inform us that the same man had tried to come into their house, insisting his girlfriend lived there. Charlotte already had a boyfriend, who we knew of and had also met that day. Rob has more balls than all of us, and threatened him with a knife the time he came over to their house, and he never bothered them again. Over the next couple of weeks, the man would occasionally come back and look into our bedroom windows. Alec was there most times. I'm so glad for that. I have no doubt that he tried the door again, but it was always locked after that. So yeah, huge scary man in the hall. Let's not meet. The intelligent and repetitive Peeping Tom. This story happened about 1.5 years ago now, and I was around 19, and it will always stay with me, as it has definitely given me PTSD and a greater fear of men since it happened. I had just moved into a college apartment with friends, only finding out a few months later that there was improper ventilation, leading to humidity and mold in the bathroom and other spaces. Maintenance/management would proceed to label it as discoloration, and to just leave the windows open/buy a fan, and stop taking steamy showers. This advice was given after this event, and ignoring my reports I made to law enforcement and the main landlord. However, we were barely adults, and never had to deal with such a terrible mold issue, buying sprays and cleaning the ceilings, crevices, tub, etc. Constantly in fear of mold inhalation. We found this, and leaving our windows open with the mosquito screens locked helped the most. This small window, the size of an average human head, about 9 feet off the ground facing the apartment's window, was of no concern to us when we were using the bathroom. After all, we had walked outside and made sure no one could easily look in. Of course, I did not predict what would come next. On our front porch, we had some pumpkins, and a single white chair that was barely used this night. This will be important to later. One night, after airing out the humid bathroom after a shower, I wished my roommate goodnight at around 2 a.m. Before going to use the toilet. I was wearing the baggiest shirt ever, thankfully, so nothing was exposed while doing so, but I nonchalantly flush and go wash my hands while glancing to the left, where the window was ajar as usual. That's when I saw it, in the pitch blackness of night, contrast to the blaring cheap bathroom lights. There was a pale, round orb with a mop of dark hair atop of it. I still could not explain the feeling I had, almost like somebody is whispering to you, just audibly enough, where you need a second or two to register what they just said. That pause, and a quick turn to the right, and then a quick spin right back for the window. I saw a white arm leaning into the mosquito screen for support, before whisking away and down, out of frame. It moved. And, without another thought, I found myself running for the front door, yelling, "Someone was looking in our bathroom!" a few times to my roommate in the living area. I heard her yelling back while I found myself already at the bottom of the window outside, now hearing scuffling through the wood chips outside our apartment building. It was clearly the sound of someone escaping through the shadows. No mistaking it. I could not see anyone through the shitty trees that were planted, and stopped as I could not pinpoint exactly where he ran. I thought about yelling some cheap insult or threat to scare him, but found myself feeling waves of shock silence me. I ran past my roommate, grabbing my phone from inside and calling my mother, who advised me to call a non-emergency number in my town. I did so, while sitting on the patio with my self-defense items, and my roommate. The lady that answered was annoyed, and sounded like she did not believe me, no matter what I said, because I did not get a good look at him. She simply sighed, and said the police will be over to survey the complex a few times, then hung up. My roommate and I were in shock, just sitting there in silence. We discussed every detail of what just happened, when we saw a cop car driving around an apartment complex a block away, then immediately drive off after 1 minute. Obviously, this left me feeling defeated more than before. I got angry, stood up, and examined the area outside my window myself. I saw no footprints or markings that were unusual, and even tried standing on the electric boxes outside to see if I could look inside. Not only were the boxes too narrow for someone any bigger than myself, as I have a small shoe size compared to the average man, but this would only allow for a view of half of the ceiling for a second or two before falling off. This was not how he looked in. I knew from the way he had struggled to get down. I saw enough of his torso to determine that he was around 5'8", and had to have some other way to easily be staring in like he had. It was also odd that he had darted off without me seeing him, and only hearing him because there are sensors placed around the complex, with one right by our bathroom window. When triggered, they display a bright and blinding light that lights up the whole back area and side of our apartment where this occurred. I brainstormed for a second, before darting off past it. It didn't go off. When I walked back to my roommate, that's when it did. I tested this twice over. Same results. It only worked when you were not running past it. I felt a sense of relief, only to the fact that I was not so crazy. I was the only witness to this, but I could tell my roommate believed me. We headed back to our front door, talking about what we would do if he came back. Obviously, we would be keeping our window closed now, but we had to give him just desserts, we thought in our exhausted and overwhelmed teen heads. That's when I joked about grabbing one of our pumpkins and hitting him over the head with it when I stopped in my tracks. "Hey, didn't we have a chair there?" I asked. The white patio chair was gone. We looked around. It was nowhere to be found. I gasped and almost fell to my knees. That's how he did it. My roommate hurriedly looked through her phone. She remembered having a food order earlier that day with a photo confirmation. Approximately 4 hours earlier, there it was, the bag at our door that was sitting directly on the white chair, next to our pumpkins, the same chair. I immediately posted this to social media sites, asking for help finding this distinct chair, thinking it would be the last hope we could have of finding this pale-faced creep. Not only had he been staring into our bathroom for God knows how long, but he had surveyed the front door area and possibly looked in through the windows here as well, although the blinds were closed. Our apartment made sure to install the worst kind of blinds that you can never fully close, so if anyone wants to look in, even into your bedroom, they would just have to crouch down a little bit. We felt disgusted and shocked. I left 3 voice messages with the apartment complex the next day, informing them of the incident and about the issues with their ventilation. As you expected, no one ever got back to me, which was weird since they always did previously. I felt like everyone failed me in this moment. I did everything I could, but I never received any closure or solace. In fact, I received tips from other college girls in the same area, telling me of very similar experiences where they sometimes had a full view of a greasy, older man, even touching himself to them. Recently, these past few months too, there have been numerous SAs, as well as peeping toms in the same area of our apartments. Funnily enough, the clear descriptions match what glimpse I got of him. Still, the police never caught anyone in connection to these cases. I never viewed this area as a bad area, and always took every precaution I could. but I still felt at fault now. I know I am not, but I hope everyone living in a similar situation makes sure to at least close their shower curtains to shield yourself, or closes their window when the bathroom is in use at all. I wish I could buy security cameras, but I know management would file a complaint. I am moving out soon, so this is the only solace I have of getting out of there and leaving this all behind. And to the greasy, stinky, pale dude who I stared eye to eye with a long time ago, I hope we never meet. For your sake. Kidnapped and zip-tied. So, now that the case is over and I can talk about it freely, I figured I would share my story about the time I got kidnapped. This happened in 2021. I was 20 at the time and had just gotten off work at 11 p.m. and went straight home to get ready to go out and meet my friend at the strip club. My kidnapper messaged me via Facebook Messenger to hang out and smoke, but I told him that I was meeting another friend and didn't want to hang out, so he offered to drive me to and from the strip club. Well, at around 12:30 a.m., he came to pick me up and said he had to dump some garbage first. He had a couch on the back of the pickup truck bed, which I assumed was the garbage he was talking about. He said he made us margaritas, but I told him I didn't want to drink until I got to my destination, so we ended up just smoking weed on the way to dump the couch. It was about a 25 to 30 minute car ride to where he wanted to dump this couch, and by the time we made it to the destination, it was about 1:15 a.m. There was a logging road off to the side of the highway that goes for miles. He pulled up all the way down to the end and left the couch there, then got back in the truck and started driving back towards the highway. But once we got halfway back to the highway, he stopped and put his car in park. Then he pulled out a pipe and started smoking more weed. After taking a hit, he turned his head to me and stared at me for a minute with a weird smirk on his face. Then all of a sudden, he almost looked like he wanted to jump at me, but stopped himself in the moment with his hands, in a motion like he was about to grab me. I got scared at this point and was frozen in shock, not knowing if it was a joke or not, but I quickly realized it was not a joke and opened my door like I was about to get out, and he did the same. I closed my door and he closed his too. We ended up playing door tag, and eventually, he got tired of it and got out of the truck and ran to my side. He opened my door and tried pulling me out by my legs. As I was trying to kick him, I pulled my phone out to call the police, and of course my Face ID didn't want to work in that moment. He ended up snatching the phone out of my hands. I kicked him hard enough in the chest and he flew backwards, falling to his butt. I grabbed my purse and hopped out of the truck, then started running towards the highway. I kept looking back to see how far he was, and he gave me a head start before running after me, then grabbing me by the back of the shoulders and forcefully throwing me into a ditch. I landed on my stomach with one leg straight out, and the other was bent at a weird angle. He sat on top of my legs and was holding my left hand behind my back. I screamed and begged him to take me home, that I wouldn't tell anyone, but he got upset that I was screaming and tried to suffocate me with his other hand, while still holding my left hand behind my back. I kept trying to pull his hands off of my face with my right hand because it got to the point where I couldn't breathe. Then finally, he let go of my face, and I turned my head around to see what he was doing. To my surprise, I watched him pull zip ties out of his front jean pocket. He zip tied my hands behind my back and tried to force himself on me. I remember digging my knees into the ground so he couldn't do anything, and he didn't. He got up and started pacing, saying, "It shouldn't have happened this way. Just do what I say." I cried, telling him if he was going to do anything, to put me back into the truck, and he did. After all that went down, he got back in the truck. Mind you, I'm still tied up, and he drove back to the highway and started driving around. I made up every excuse to get him to take the zip ties off, and he wouldn't. I asked for a cigarette, and he lit one, smoked on it a bit, then held it up to my mouth saying, "I'll hold it for you." At this point I thought to myself, what can I do to get myself out of this situation? I thought I was going to die. I started saying things like, "You can be my sugar daddy. I will pay to take us out to dinner tomorrow. If this is all you wanted from me, you could have just said that." He loved it so much that he started saying he would put me on his life insurance policy so that when he dies, I can get the money. Eventually I asked him again if he would take the zip ties off. They were so tight that it was cutting my circulation. He pulled over to the side of the road and pulled out a mini pocket knife from his car keys, then cut them off of me. It took a few tries because of how tight they were. Then he gave me my phone back. I had an Apple Watch on my wrist and asked him for it after noticing that it wasn't on my wrist anymore. Then he got this surprised look on his face and said, "We need to go back and get it." Then he turned around and headed back to where everything had just happened. I got so scared and thought to myself, "Yep, this is it. I'm going to die tonight, and nobody will know until somebody finds my dead body." Once we got there, he told me to stay in the truck, and he got out and searched the ditch for my watch. He came back to the truck after 5 minutes and said he couldn't find it, but would be back in the morning to look when it's light outside. We got back on the highway and headed back to town. Once we got into town, he asked me, "What do you want to do now?" I said, "Bring me to my mom's house. I have work in 4 hours and I'm tired." It was about 4:30 a.m. by this time, and he brought me to my mom's. After getting to my mom's house, I looked his name up on Google, and he was on parole for first-degree murder. He had served 17 and a half years in prison for murdering someone for their life insurance policy. I'm 22 now, and thankfully I got to see another day. I was subpoenaed to testify against him, and he was found guilty of all charges on November 6th of 2023, but as of now, he hasn't been sentenced yet. I still wonder what could have happened. In 2018, I lived with my partner and my German Shepherd in the Humboldt Park neighborhood of Chicago. I was 33 years old, and our apartment was a 4th-floor walk-up unit, a very typical low-budget Chicago rental in a changing neighborhood. The layout of our building is going to matter in this story. Our building had a total of 12 units. Mine and the 3 below me had a shared front entrance. The other 8 units were through a second entrance. All 12 apartments had connected back porches and stairs that shared a walkway to a rear gate, which led to an alley. From the front stairwell, there are windows on each landing to the back porches. You can see the back door of my apartment when standing at the front door through that window. We had good relations with our neighbors, especially those that lived directly below us and shared our front door. This was the thing that saved all 3 of us: my partner, my dog, and me. My partner was in a touring band at the time and would leave for weekends or weeks at a time. And it was a scary thing for me because I was essayed and stalked by an ex in my teens and 20s. I always worried something would tip him off and he'd start stalking me again. A little less than a month before a 2-week tour my partner had scheduled, I received a creepy Facebook message from that stalker ex from yet another new account. About a week after that, my car was broken into. The glove box was emptied. Things were thrown around, but the only thing that was taken was a bag of dog treats. I had about $20 in change in the compartment between the seats, and they left the money. I was on high alert at that point, and very scared about the time I'd be alone during the tour. My partner was kind of irritated with me and the situation, and felt that it was too last minute to cancel, especially over what amounted to a bad feeling, and a few isolated things that weren't direct threats. And truthfully, car break-ins are very, very common in Chicago. It happened to me like 15 times, and police usually do reports over the phone and don't even come to the scene. What I found really strange was that the thief didn't take the money. There was a homeless man who had started camping on the boulevard nearby recently. My partner left for his tour, and I set up cameras and bought door braces for my front and back doors. I became completely nocturnal, unable to sleep at night. My poor dog developed diarrhea, maybe because she was picking up on my stress levels. It meant that I was taking her down all flights of 4 stairs for her to go blast her bowels out 6 or 7 times at night. I had the distinctly prickly crawling sensation of being watched when I would take her out, but I couldn't tell what was genuine and what was my own fear and paranoia. Her diarrhea lasted an unusually long time, like 3 or 4 days. I was going in and out of the main door a lot, feeling very scared, and I noticed that some of my neighbors wouldn't pull the door all the way closed, so the lock engaged. I mentioned it to my downstairs neighbor one day, including that I was extra careful because of the stalker. He was supportive, said he'd mention it to the other neighbors if he saw them, and I noticed that the door was locked more frequently after that. My partner came home at about 11 a.m. on Sunday morning. At about 8:30 a.m. that morning, my first floor neighbor's place was burglarized. He was a metalhead dude who collected instruments, sold weed and psychedelics, and also lived alone. I guess he went out for breakfast and left his door unlocked while he was gone. Someone had come in, eaten the leftovers in the fridge, took his coat and pair of boots. They also took his college diploma, but left $500 in the same cabinet. They left all the expensive musical instruments and mixing equipment, left the drugs, but did take a set of keys. The keys were to the first floor apartment, and a master key for the front door and the back gate. My neighbors ran into each other right after the break-in, and the second floor neighbor said to go tell me because I have a stalker. So the metalhead neighbor came up to let me know what had happened. My partner had just gotten home from his tour when he knocked at the front door. I jumped out of my skin, but looked through the peephole, recognized him, and the three of us stood on the stairs at my front door while he told us about the break-in. We jabberjawed for a while, about 15 to 20 minutes. While we were talking, we heard the front door open and close below us, but thought nothing of it. Then we saw a man climbing up my back porch steps to my back door through the window. There was no other apartment he could have been going to, and he had to walk past all 11 more accessible units on his way to mine. He was not my stalker. I did not recognize him, but his images burned into my mind. He was wearing flashy black and white high-top sneakers, and his black coat was oversized and hanging off his shoulders. We locked eyes through the windows, and he froze up halfway up the stairs to my back porch. He slowly took a cell phone and called someone as he slowly turned around halfway up the steps. He walked back down the stairs in an artificially slow motion, like he was pretending to be nonchalant, and then bolted into a sprint as soon as he hit the porch below mine. My neighbor ran downstairs and dialed 911. My partner and I ran through the apartment to the back porch and saw a sedan and a windowless van pull out from a sketchy building 2 doors down. Both cars floored it out the alley. We didn't get the plates, but the cops said it wouldn't have mattered. There wasn't any crime committed, and nothing concrete can justify stopping them. They very condescendingly explained this to me as they took my statement later. My neighbor is the only one who actually made the call and has a police report. My partner and I were just considered witnesses. For a long time, the thing that scared me the most was the tool that my neighbor found when he went running downstairs. It was a 2x4 piece of wood, cut to about 2 feet, but about 6 inches of it had been made into a handle. It looked like a paddle, and for a long time I couldn't figure out what it was, but I'm pretty sure that it was a ram for the door jam locks. When I looked at my door afterward, it looked like the frame had been repaired, like it had been broken open before. It seems like they used one master key to place their ram, get somebody at the back door to catch me if I tried to run out that way, and somebody else was going to come back around, and they'd break in my front door and go forward with whatever they had planned. We caught them before they could catch me unaware. They seemed to have aborted the plan. I suspect they'd been watching me, especially while I was taking out my dog, and figured that I was alone. It was pure coincidence that my partner had gotten home 30 minutes before all this. I feel that we all could have been horribly injured, or worse, had we been trapped inside and they'd gotten the jump on us. Nothing else ever came of it, except that my landlord refused to change the locks, but he did agree to let us out of our lease. I moved out of Chicago, and now have added a younger dog that I'm training to do some bite work. My house is surrounded by cameras and floodlights and wingnut neighbors, so whoever was on our back porch, and whatever they had planned, let's not meet. I was in a very bizarre robbery. Throwaway account, because I don't know why. Just didn't want this on my main one. Not much else a reason. So I'm a 29-year-old male. This happened when I was 20, and it has led to some charming anxiety issues, which were actually only addressed about 6 months ago. I have been told the best way to cope with things is to confront the issues head on, and in a way, that's what I'm trying to accomplish. So before I got my life together, I used to work odd jobs around my hometown's neighboring towns. It was my way of avoiding college and going into the oil field. I made my money fixing fences, cleaning out horse stalls, and unloading feed and hay. Not actually bad work, to be honest, but I'll admit that I used it as an excuse for not doing more with myself. When I knocked off of work, there was this one little country-styled gas station that I used to go to because they never ID'd, and it was easy to get a bottle of liquor or a 6-pack, and they sold some of the best fried chicken that even to this day I've ever had. Well, on this particular day, there was nobody at the register. It was a little after 5 in the afternoon, and there were literally only 3 employees at this store, as it was a family-owned and operated place. I had plans with a girl that I was seeing, and I promised her a 6-pack and a night of relaxation at her place while her parents weren't home. I was in a hurry because of this, so I went to inquire about why nobody was working. I went into the back of the store, where I found the owner, along with 4 other guys playing poker on a fold-out table. I said I needed to make a purchase, and he said he would be there in a minute. The owner, while a very good man, definitely had his share of addictions. At this time, he was high on something, which could have been a number of things. He told me to sit down and play a few hands. The owner was wearing a vest that had all of his money clipped into it. I told him I wasn't trying to lose any money. Then he offered to float me the buy-in. I said I'd rather not, but the 20-year-old me was always much easier to persuade. I'm not a good card player, but something my family had always told me was that I have more luck than I do sense. And within an hour of playing, I had made enough money to give the owner his entry fee back, and still had a lot of money left over. I'll put it this way, this wasn't an extremely high-stakes game of cards, but after paying the owner his fee, I was holding close to $4,000. I'm not a gambler, and you'll learn why, so I'm not sure even to this day how the dynamics work. While we were playing, talking shit, drinking beer and smoking cigarettes, just a good time. Then, the time became not so good. The beep from the front door rang into the back room. I'm one for punctuality, at least when it comes to doing your job, so I was a little annoyed when the owner didn't tend to whoever was coming into the store, much like he didn't tend to me when I initially walked in. That's a random irk of mine. This part still gives me chills to think about. I could hear the clacking of steel-toed boots hitting the floor, which made its way towards the back room that we were in. It didn't seem like much, meaning that it wasn't completely out of the ordinary. Then, the door of the room flew open, and 4 guys entered the room. All were wearing either red or blue bandanas over their faces. As far as their attire, they didn't look much different from anybody else. 2 wore cowboy hats, and the other 2 wore trucker-styled caps. All 4 were holding shoulderable weapons. We were all ordered to our feet. Everybody complied. It took me longer than expected to register what was actually happening. The table was flipped over, and 5 of us, minus the owner, were forced against the wall at gunpoint. There was a guy on the door who apparently missed orientation because 2 of the guys in our party had slipped past him, and he had to chase them down through the main store. The 4 of us that remained were held against the wall by a guy holding what I'm assuming now to be an M16 assault rifle. The owner was taken, beaten, and one of the guys that I'm assuming or have always assumed to be the ringleader took a book knife and cut his clothing off. I honestly thought this was going somewhere else, but I guess thankfully it didn't. One of the guys started duct taping his ankles and his wrists. At the time, I'm thinking, okay, they're just going to restrain us, take the money, and then leave. Not ideal, but that's manageable enough. Then, they put what looked like a pillowcase or a sack and put it over his head, then sloppily started wrapping duct tape around it. 20-year-old me wasn't having it. A bunch of punks with guns weren't going to walk in and start messing with me or my company. Boy, was I stupid. I threw a nearly empty Heineken bottle at the owner's primary assailant, then progressed towards him. The bottle went nowhere near where I was aiming, and I literally lifted 1 foot off the floor and didn't even put it down before I was struck and fell back into the wall. The guy that hit me screamed in my face. Don't even remember what he said. It still gives me a panic attack when I try to revisit it. The remainder of us were duct taped by our wrists and ankles as well. At one point, I had the barrel of a rifle in my face, and the guy next to me, God bless his soul, chastised the guy by saying, "You want to point that at somebody? Then point it at me, not him." The next part screws with me in a variety of ways that I don't even know how to explain. One of the masked men pointed the rifle at him, then pulled the trigger. All that could be heard was a metallic click. I don't know about all of them, but the one who had pulled the trigger definitely didn't have a loaded gun, which leads me to believe that the guns were just props. They took the money, then shut the lights off, and left the store. The back room has no windows, so it was dark, like really dark. I kept a multi-tool in my pocket for work, but it wasn't one of the heavier grade ones. It was a 2x2-inch one that could fit in my wallet, but I always kept it loose in my pocket during the day. It took some flexibility on my part to contort my restrained body enough to be able to get it out of my pocket, but I was eventually able to free myself. For whatever reason, I thought the owner was going to suffocate, so I went to him and cut him free first. He was fine, just in pain. Everyone made it out with nursing and trauma at most. No fatalities. The 2 that got away were found restrained the same day in the walk-in freezer. Police were called. No investigation was conducted. I couldn't even drive myself home. I had to call my sister to come pick me up. I don't know about what was actually in store for us, and what would have happened if we didn't comply. This is the source of many anxiety attacks, and the reason I'm partially afraid of the dark. I'm not sure if this classifies for the sub, but definitely worth getting off my chest. That's all for this video. Leave a like and subscribe if you made it this far. And as always, thanks for watching.